Governor McGreevy's top political fundraiser was arrested today on obstruction of justice and related federal charges. New Jersey-based developer Charles Kushner is charged with hiring a prostitute to blackmail two witnesses in a federal investigation.
The backstory. For Charles Kushner, the years leading up to his trouble with the law were going exactly the way he had hoped they would. Kushner, the son of a self-made East Coast real estate tycoon, had become a powerful donor to politicians holding offices in New Jersey and New York, most importantly, future New Jersey Governor Jim McGreevy. Aside from his financial support to political campaigns, Charles Kushner was active in philanthropy. Years before the Varsity Blues scandal, Kushner made donations to NYU and Harvard, universities his sons would later attend. Back to Kushner and his relationship with McGreevy. After 9/11, McGreevy won the election and became New Jersey's governor, and Kushner was appointed a seat on the board of the New York Port Authority, the very agency with oversight of the design and construction contracts for the World Trade Center memorial site. To mark his rise in social status and power, Kushner bought a $5.4 million apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The crime. According to court records, in 1999, Kushner was breaking campaign finance laws and committing tax fraud when he started making substantial political campaign contributions in the names of his business partners. This went on unchecked until 2002, but by then the contributions already exceeded $385,000. What the court documents leave out is the fact that some of his business partners were family members, including 3 of his siblings and his children, who were all tied to Kushner Companies, Inc. Eventually, the misuse of company assets was discovered internally by an accountant at Westminster Management, a division of Kushner Companies. Robert Yontef, the accountant, also alerted Kushner's sister Esther, who was a partner in the corporation. Before any criminal investigation or charges were on the horizon for Charles Kushner, the immediate fallout from his actions began to play out in the civil courts. Yontef filed an employment lawsuit in federal court, and Murray Kushner, Charles's brother, filed a lawsuit of his own, the infamous Kushner versus Kushner, which made headlines statewide. Kushner's crimes did not end there. The civil suits had divided the Kushner siblings, so when investigators from the Federal Election Commission, or FEC, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC, began to seek out his siblings for their cooperation in their respective investigations, they agreed. In an attempt to prevent them from testifying against him, Kushner created an elaborate plot that involved a conspiracy to blackmail using high-priced escorts and video surveillance, all with the intended targets being his accountant Yontef and his brother-in-law Billy. Yontef did not fall for the setup, but Billy, after several failed attempts, did meet up with an escort. Kushner was a longtime client of hers, and video footage was recorded of the encounter. Kushner made copies of the tape, printed screenshots, and prepared the sets to be sent to members of the family, including his siblings, their adult children, and even their grandchildren. When Esther received a copy of the photos, she turned them over to the federal investigators who had been looking into her brother's alleged criminal activity. The investigation. A series of events in 2003 put Charles Kushner on the radar of the U.S. District Attorney for New Jersey, Chris Christie. Before Kushner could be approved for the Port Authority position, he needed the state Senate's approval. There was just one problem. State law states bank owners can't make political contributions for state office, and Kushner had ownership in North Crown Bank. Instead of testifying at a state Senate hearing, Charles Kushner withdrew his nomination to the Port Authority Board. This raised a few eyebrows, including Chris Christie's, because he had already caught wind of the Kushner versus Kushner lawsuit. The evidence was beginning to come into focus for the U.S. Attorney's Office, but there were still a lot of unanswered questions. The civil complaints, the political donations, the recent withdrawing from the Port Authority nomination, could they all be linked back to Kushner's tax evasion? The investigation focused on following the money trails between the various corporations Kushner controlled and the laundry list of recipients such as charitable organizations and political campaigns. A major advantage that Chris Christie had in the investigation was access to the FEC campaign finance investigation and the FDIC investigation into Kushner's North Crown ties. The case that the U.S. Attorney was building against Kushner was a strong one. Knowing he was running out of time and options, Kushner began making attempts to slow the investigation into him. Initially, he involved his team of expensive lawyers in unsuccessful attempts to discredit witnesses in the federal investigation, and even attempting to divide his siblings who were united in their claims against their brother Charles. Eventually, Charles Kushner decided to try a different approach. It was at this point in the investigation that Kushner commits the second phase of his crimes. The court proceedings. The day after the U.S. attorney filed his complaint, Charles Kushner turned himself over to federal authorities in Newark, where he was handcuffed. He was charged with witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and promoting interstate prostitution under the Mann Act. Kushner was freed on bond pending trial. From a prosecutorial standpoint, the additional charges against Kushner took away any leverage his legal defense team may have hoped for at trial. The complaint did not even include the tax evasion charges, for which there was ample evidence at that time of the investigation. The scoop is, it became clear to Kushner and his team that Christie had more cards to play against him. Kushner pled guilty to the following 18-count information. Counts 1 to 16, assisting the preparation of false tax returns. Count 17, witness retaliation. Count 18, making false statements to the Federal Election Commission. The sentencing. A few months later, at his federal sentencing hearing, Kushner was ultimately sentenced to a term of 24 months in the custody of the U.S. Bureau of Prisons and was incarcerated at Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama. Following the term of his imprisonment, Kushner was placed on supervised release for 2 years to run concurrently, 2 for counts 1 to 16 and 2 for counts 17 and 18. Shortly after his release from federal prison, Kushner gave an interview to a real estate industry magazine and did not seem to show any remorse for his crimes. When asked how his relationship with his family was following what transpired, Kushner had this to say: "I don't believe God and my parents will ever forgive my brother and sister for instigating a criminal investigation and being cheerleaders for the government and putting their brother in jail because of jealousy, hatred, and spite." The pardon. In the final months of President Trump's term in office, he began issuing pardons to political allies such as Roger Stone and Paul Manafort. One of those pardoned on December 23, 2020 was Charles Kushner. What stood out to me on the announcement was the support of a U.S. Attorney for the District of Utah. However, not listed was former U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey, Chris Christie. Chris Christie described the Kushner case as one of the most loathsome, disgusting crimes that I prosecuted. Mr. Kushner pled guilty. He admitted the crimes.